Do you have an older Saab that has a blank looking SID like this? Whether you're missing 1 or 2 pixels or a screen that's completely burnt out, we've got the solution for you. So I have an SID out of a Vigan, and we're going to be going through and repairing this for a customer and show you a few of the options and the step-by-step of how we do this. Now this one also came with a damaged housing here, so that housing will also be getting replaced with a non-broken one. Now I have 12 volts, actually 13 volts going to this SID. This, you can clearly tell the screen is actively missing a lot of the pixels. Bulbs are very weak. They're not as bright as they should be, so a few of the bulbs are burnt out. Now we're gonna go ahead and replace this screen and replace the ribbon. Typically when you just replace the ribbon, you can find yourself purchasing one of these ribbons for about 10 bucks. So you can reuse your OEM screen if it is not damaged. Now, 9 times out of 10, these are actually bad as well. So we have another screen here that, as you can see, I was gonna reuse it, but is slightly damaged right here. So this screen is not gonna be reusable. Now, the screens are about 50-50. Sometimes they're bad. At this point, age is really a factor. So we go ahead and replace the screen and the ribbon. Now, you can just buy a ribbon and heat stamp that on both sides, and that usually does work in most cases, but 50% of the time now the screens are failed. So what we typically do is we replace the whole screen and the ribbon. So I've got a new screen and ribbon here, and we'll be replacing the screen and ribbon together. And we're going to be replacing the bulbs with upgraded LED bulbs. We offer our service that allows you to change to multiple colors, upwards to 7 colors, whether it be red, blue, yellow, pink, green, crystal blue. So as you can see here, I have a lot of different options. When you are putting in the bulbs, there are a couple different options with the bulbs and how you put those in. Now they're all going to be LED, OLED. We're going to go ahead, unplug this. Now I just have this rig here just to help me test when I'm doing this. As you can see, we have multiple units there that we repair, ship out, or replace, whether it be for our own cars or customers' cars. We repair all of these units. Now all these units get repaired slightly differently, but all of them can also be updated with new LEDs as well, whether they have to be soldered or just replace like a normal bulb. So first step, we're going to go ahead and remove this. So I actually just kind of pull this out like so. It comes out pretty straightforward, pops out, it goes over here. Now that is going to expose this little speaker here. Now this actually falls off relatively easy, so just be careful when you put that back in. It does allow some pressure to seal that around so you get a more crisp sound through these little holes. If you remove this, the noise isn't as loud. So that's kind of a preference, and even in some cases, some people will actually ask us to disable this and just go ahead and remove the speaker. So that's preference if you don't like the little noises and chimes. Now we're going to go ahead and remove these. There's just the 2 screws here, pretty straightforward. They're actually T9s. Most people don't have a T9 in their kit, T8 or T10, so you are going to want to get a T9. So, and then you're going to slowly work this back. Once you slide this off, it only comes off one way. You want to make sure you kind of wrap it up around like that. Comes off. And then to remove the outer shell, you're going to want to remove one more here in the center. And then once that's removed, you just wiggle this out. Straight off like that. And then now, as you can see, we have all of these are our bulbs. So our bulbs, I typically replace the bulbs first, and then I go in and then I replace the screen. Now, either order doesn't matter. That's kind of a preference, but I typically replace the bulbs first just so I can kind of, you know, not worry about getting dirt or things on the screen. So I'll show you kind of what that looks like. This one, we're going to be putting our extra bright greens. Now we have different options that we can essentially go with. So we actually have LEDs that are multiple. This is actually 3 actual LED bulbs. We have ones that are just a more crisp, clean, and then we have some of the older style. Now you can even go one step further, and we'll actually use these a lot. So I'm actually going to show you how these work. They tend to fit a little bit better, where these tend to like strip out. If you look right here, you can kind of see that's kind of a pain in the butt. So we're going to go ahead and show you how we utilize these. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to go ahead and utilize 6 of these. So we've got our bulbs. It does save you a little bit of time if you just put in the ones that essentially already have these, but they don't sit as nice. So I like to actually utilize these and reuse those. They just don't tend to seat as well when you use the non-OEM. So what I do is I come in here, just very carefully remove each individual guy here. Now you can see how a lot of these are burnt out. Now this last one is a little tricky to get to. You can get to it when you don't have the casing on. But now you can see that this bulb is clearly blown out, this one's not. So we have 2 burnt bulbs here and 4 non-burnt bulbs. Now typically what I do is I actually just use a razor blade. This is pretty easy. You can actually come in here, pop this in. So you can pop this guy up. Same with this. You're gonna do this very simple. Once you have these off, this little bulb pulls out. So once that's pulled out, you then can take your new LED, you slide it into these 2 holes. Once it's sat in there, I like to get it nice and snug. You then bring it, you wrap it up and around. And then we do the same thing, we wrap it up and around. Now you can either double wrap like that, get a better contact. It doesn't like to seat as well if you do it this way, so I usually like to trim them, but if you do double wrap like that, it does work. So once I didn't have the bulb fixed like this, I actually come in here, I rehook this back up to power. Now the reason why I'm doing this is, this is a crucial step, is this only works one direction. So this does not work either direction. So when you put it in here, you can kind of test and see if it lights. Now if I flip it around and put it in here like this, it's not lighting up. So what ends up happening is I have a bulb that's not lighting up, but if I take it, I flip it around, it'll then light up. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in. So they are directional. And as you can see now, these are for our buttons. Both of these are buttons. So as you can see, we have an LED here. So now we're gonna do another one real quick for you, just to show you how this goes again. So we pop this guy up, do another one real quick, pop this guy up, go ahead, do the same here, pop this guy up, have them both loose, pull him out, grab another LED. Now these are the brighter, these are 3 bulbs on here, so these tend to be brighter. Some people don't like them to be a lot brighter, so we'll use 1 LED versus 3 LEDs, preference of the customer. I tend to like to have SID brighter, and then when I essentially think it's a little overpowering or too bright, I just put it in night panel mode and it turns it off. So we do the same thing with dashes and the ACC as well. We'll show a video on both of those at a later date, and then we also upgrade to the newer dash from the Dames on the OG 9.3s and the 04. 05 and back 9.5s as well. So now that I have my bulb again, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can get lucky with my first. It's a 50-50 shot always, and I got it. So once that's in, so now I have green here. I'm gonna go ahead and replace the next 4. We have all of our new bulbs in. They look way better instead of the tacky orange that I typically tend to not care for. Some people like the OEM orange, so we'll even do the LED orange, and it actually makes this that much brighter, which is actually really cool when you do orange. But some people don't like the super bright, so you know, it is what it is. Now, as you can see, the pixels obviously still out. This screen is still good though. So if you want to reuse this screen, you could reuse this screen and just replace the ribbon. Now this is what actually fails here. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove these now. Typically when I'm installing these, I kind of have like a little system down how I do these, but I typically will, just so I don't zap myself a little bit with 13 volts, I typically do unplug this real quick. Now once I take those 2 bolts out, this just slides off, so you just need to be a little careful. And then come over here. And then now that we know all of our LEDs are good, so, and then that comes off. So as you can see, rip this off. Don't need to be careful with that because that's getting replaced. So there are 2 tabs here. So you don't want to break these. If you do, it tends to not be as in there as tight. So I'll just get a little bit of a razor blade here, pop it like that. Same thing on this side, just pop it over. Now you're gonna want to keep this in here too. This helps reflect. You don't have to keep it in there. It does make it kind of a pain in the ass getting it back in there sometimes. So that's, once again, that's a preference thing. And the same with this rubber seal that runs down along here. That seal, you want to make sure that stays in there. So once you have that popped out, past this little guy right here, that popped out, we'll go ahead and remove the old screen. Now, as I mentioned before, if you were to replace the ribbon, you would just remove this completely, clean all this up, and then put your new ribbon on there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set this over here. I'm going to go ahead and get our new screen here. This is our new screen. Now we're going to go ahead and put this aside. I typically like to use this when I'm doing this install, and I'll show you how it comes in hand. But we have this old glue on here that has to be removed now. I'm going to go ahead and get my proper tool set up here, which is our stamp tool. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. This is what we'll actually use to push this down. Now what I will do is come in here, and I do need to clean up this old glue. Now obviously using a new screen, we don't need to worry about cleaning glue up over here. One thing we will have to do though is we will need to cut a slit right here. Some of them do come pre-slit, some of them don't. That's preference once again. Now I typically don't recommend taking a razor blade and you could get away with doing this, but I have noticed if you do this, you always don't get a best contact. So it's always best to use a proper glue solvent that is not going to affect the circuitry. So I have an actual glue cleaner that's specifically for doing this job. So what you do is you come in here, and then you're just going to slowly clean it up. And then I'm gonna do this, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. And what I'll do is I'll finish cleaning this all the way to the end, and then I'll kind of show you what that looks like after I'm done cleaning. Now that I have all the glue off, you can see we have a nice clean finished. It took me about, it took me 5 Q-tips roughly of scrubbing. So I went ahead and used about 5 Q-tips to get it scrubbed nice and clean, as you can see. Now what I like to do is I like to actually use this little guy to prop the board up like so. Right, now you can see I have a nice clean surface. So we're going to go ahead and remove our screen here. Now there is little covers, which is nice, that are on these that we will remove, as you can see, once we actually install it. Now this really can only go on one way, but if you were to somehow put it on backwards, it really wouldn't work. We're going to go ahead and line these up to our best ability here. We're going to try to get the plus signs as like a guideline. It's not about having them on top of each other, it's about having them level about the same. So this just helps us level them. Once it's level, we're then going to come in here and grab our soldering stamp tool. Now I like to do a light stamp just to kind of get it seated, make sure that we have it seated everywhere it's supposed to be, nice and lightly here. And then once I have it stamped down, I then like to do a little bit of slide action. And then you go back and forth. Then I do a little bit of a harder press once I slide back and forth. So a light press, slide back and forth, and then we do a hard, firmer press, and then I like to do a really hard, long press. Okay, great. So that is on. Now something I like to do after this is I like to come here with my razor blade. You do have to cut this section out with this particular ribbon. So I'm going to cut this out very carefully, like so. Just a little triangle. So now we have a little triangle out. We then are going to grab our board here. Before I actually put the board on, you can actually test and see what your pixelation looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in, and then we can see that our ribbon, we can see everything looks pretty good. So it's just gonna be clear, so you're not gonna be really able to tell, but you can see the pixelation that's on there. So once we've tested that, we then can put this on. I'm going to go ahead and put our board back on. Now, very straightforward. We want to just be careful when we're putting this on. Go ahead and lightly press this back in. Make sure we don't get our pins lined up incorrectly. So we're going to do a light press here. So we're going to go ahead and get our pins back on. Go ahead and let's go ahead and remove. That's off. We then seat this accordingly. And then we're going to go ahead and remove this from here. So our screen is on there now. Nice and new screen. We're going to go ahead and test. Make sure we're getting all of our proper pixelation. And we've got plugged in. Now everything is working as it should. All of our ribbon looks good here. We don't have any kind of kinks or anything. No issues. So now that we've tested that, we're good there. We're going to go ahead and most importantly put our screws back. So we're going to go ahead and get our screws put back in. Nice and snug. These don't need to be cranked down, just snug them back down. So we got both of those on. other unit was broke, so we're gonna just go ahead and lightly push this back on here. So you want to make sure when you're putting in that you have these little tabs fall there and you have this little ribbon above before you press it on. If not, it can get stuck like that and then you'll catch it and then it won't go on correctly. So you need to make sure that you're putting it in like this, and when you do, it'll slide in much smoother. If you don't do that, you end up getting caught and then you end up breaking it. So just make sure you line that up like so and then press it down. That will go back on nice and easy. So once that's on, make sure all 3 of our bolt holes line up. So I like to make sure the buttons and everything functions as it's supposed to as well. So then once we have all of those in, we can then go ahead and put our screws back in. So just put our center screw in first. That holds everything in place so the buttons don't get moved around. So once that screws in, you can test all of your buttons are working as they should. So once those are all working as they should, we then grab our back case like so. Like I said, this only goes on one way, so you gotta make sure you clear that. Make sure that this goes on nice and smoothly. Once that's on, so we're gonna put our 2 bolts back in the back. Put our little rubber guy back on. He's on. I grab our case here. This goes pretty straightforward. Just goes over, and once you get it lined up, pops in. Now we should be able to plug this in and test. Make sure everything's good. So now we have a fully functioning SID with everything working. So everything works as it's supposed to. So one other thing, if you're going to something that is not yellow, orange, or arguably green, if you're doing anything other than those colors, you're going to want to actually remove this paint off of here so you get a better color. So we typically red, blue, crystal blue, pink, we typically remove this. So all we do is we just take a paint remover more or less. Even Goo Gone works, and then you just remove that. So once you remove that, that gives you a much brighter finish. So you have a much cleaner looking LED light that shines through these. So we typically remove all that and then install it back in. That's just another note if you're going to be putting a different color LED in your car. That one's also green. This is a red one that we have. So if you typically have brighter LEDs, if you do the 3 bulb versus the single bulb or the 2 bulb, it does affect it a little bit. And depending on what screen you use too, the OEM screens do typically look a little better if you do the LED conversion. If you don't want to take the risk of doing a ribbon and using your old screen, because the old screens do break, I mean, you just go with an updated screen. Honestly, still looks way better than the original orange. Now that we've got our SID repaired, let's see what it looks like. Out with the orange and in with the green, everything is legible with our brand new screen. Now it looks like we're going to be doing our ACC next time in our next video. Won't you join in and see?